Out of all the vintage classics that we see on the road, it begs the question, what do their home garages look like? If one found themselves cruising the eastern side of Inglewood, Florida, one would find a house with a home garage, built identical to a service station from the 1950s.
Willie was singing that crazy tune. There she was, getting down, riding that bull, people crowding around. She stepped off and walked the room, got me hooked, nothing I couldn't do.
And inside, an inclusive variety of Americana motor machinery of different generations, each sharing a stable to bed down until their next Sunday drive comes around.
She got me hooked, yes, she got me. Up to the bar to get her a drink. The shooting star had me on the brink. She said, cowboy, why you talking to me? You ain't John Wayne, stop pretending to be. Lose the boots and your Stetson hat.
I guess I got my first antique car back in when I just turned 21. I started with Model A's, and that's what I had for a long time till I got into a Hudson Terraplane, and I bought that, and I've kind of loved Hudsons ever since then.
And what was your first car?
Oh gee, my first car? Well, first car was, my dad had a service station. I started working for him when I was 8 years old. We built my first one. It was a little boat tail speedster that we built the body on, a Renault chassis with a Ford V8 60 motor, and I drove that mostly through high school. And kind of fun little car. No top, no doors, just climb over it and get in, you know.
Dave Lanning was originally from Brighton, Michigan, who was back in the day the owner and operator of the Leonard Service Station. As the collection grew and the foundation that he lives on, Dave then decorated his home garage in the form of a service station.
Actually, I just got into mobile by accident. I went to a swap meet, and my wife at the time, before she passed, says, we ought to build a gas station like we had when you were a young guy. And I said, yeah, I should. Well, I went to a swap meet, and I found a couple of mobile signs, so that's how I got into mobile. But my actual first service station was called Leonard, which was strictly a Michigan gas, very good quality stuff, but a small company. They had their own refinery and have good products. But and then I bought a Marathon station in the next town down where I was actually from, and I had the Marathon until I went with Snap-on tools, and that's where I ended up my career with selling Snap-on tools and being a manager for Snap-on until I retired. Over the years, I've had probably over 100 collector cars, but like I say, I do like Hudson, so I've ended up with, over the years, probably about at least 15 different Hudsons from 15 through 1956, and right now I think I got like 4 or 5 Hudsons that I've kind of grown to like, you know, and kept them.
So tell us about that Dodge there, which I said, what you said it was a replacement of the touring car you had
Yes, yeah.
And what do you like about it?
Well, the old Dodge, well, that was their byline. They called it the dependable Dodge, and they are. They were actually. I don't know. A lot of people don't know that if it hadn't been for the Dodge brothers, there probably wouldn't be a Ford, because in the early days they used to build all the engines and transmissions for the early Fords till Ford got big enough to start making his own. So the Dodge brothers actually became more wealthy than Ford did. And their widows still are, all down through Detroit. There's a lot of the old Dodge mansions and things like that, because Ford didn't have a lot of money, so he would pay them somewhat for their work, but he gave a lot of their pay in Ford stock, which became very valuable. So that's how they really made most of their money, was off the Ford stock.
And for the amount of car shows you've taken it to, what are the most common reactions that people give every time they see it?
Well, at first they think it's a Model T, but then I have to straighten them out that it is a Dodge Brothers. It's not really called Dodge. It's before Chrysler owned Dodge. You know, that didn't happen until the two brothers passed away, Horace and John, and they died in '24. And then it was in receivership. A bank owned it for a couple of years, and then Walter P. Chrysler bought them out to go with his empire he was starting. But most of the people don't realize it's a 12-volt system, which is very unusual for back then. Right from 1915, when they first started making their own car, they were always 12-volt. Silent starter, it's called. It's a starter generator combination, and once it starts, it turns into a generator. It's a very efficient system. I found this 26 Studebaker here, and that was the first car I bought just to be in the horseless carriage club. And I bought it from a mechanic, and it was a nice appearing and nice driving car, but he didn't really have the bugs worked out of it too well. So the first two tours we went on, I had problems with it. One time, the first time the generator quit, and I finally found a part for that and got it fixed. And the next time we took it out, the distributor let loose in it. So I'm still waiting for parts for that right now. So in the meantime, I bought this 22 Dodge to be able to tour, because we got a tour coming up next month. We're going on with that. So.
You probably get asked this a lot by a lot of people at car shows. Out of all that you have in your collection, which one is either your most favorite or which one that stands out the most?
Well, probably the Railton back here in the back. It's an English car, but it has a complete Hudson undercarriage and running gear. And he made a car called Invicta before that, but he tried to make the whole thing, and it wasn't a very big money maker. So then he ran into a guy that knew about Hudson, and they were always Hudson was always kind of a fast car. Their first car was 1909, and they had what they called the mile-a-minute speedster, which would do 60 miles an hour, and not very many cars would do 60 miles an hour back in 1909. So they were, and up until the Hornet came out in '51, then it became a real speed deal, and all through the early days of racing.
Dave Lanning's car collection shows that classic cars still have a place on the road in many ways. No matter how much the domestic scene has changed over the years, these models still get heads turning from nearly every age group in passing. Even children, whenever Dave gets asked if they can sit in them.
Most of them really like them, you know. Can I sit in it? Can I ride in it? Then they want to know how fast it'll go, and different things like that for young people. You know, I'm talking about teenagers on younger. You know.
Displays of history, innovation, inspiration, and perhaps motivation for younger people to learn how to work on cars early in their life.
You know, I think there's a big market for a young person that wants to get into being a mechanic. I think as highly desirable right now, as are most of the, like a welding or plumbing or anything that, where it's a hands-on deal. I think that there's a lot of schools now that are finally starting to go back to some of that. And there's a few schools around that are just antique car restoring places. And if a guy gets in it, whether he wants to work for somebody or have his own business, I think it's a big opportunity. I know around here, there are very few mechanics where most of the guys at clubs I belong to said that's one of their first questions is, where can I go to get my car worked on? You know, there's very few places that even work on these older cars anymore. So it's pretty much wide open, I think, for a young fella or girl. There are girls in this too. If you're new to the hobby and want to get started in it, you're way better off to get a decent running car that's not rusty to start with. You know, people buy, you know, if you get say you're going to buy a 55 Chevrolet, they're a pretty popular car. But if you've got one that's all rusted up and it needs a lot of work versus one that is still running and it's in decent shape and never been rusted, even if you have to pay twice as much for it, you're way better off, I think, to get the car that's going to be easier to bring back to brand new than a rust bucket, as they say. I really kind of tend to like the independent companies more than Ford or GM or Chrysler. It seems like they really had to be more innovative than the big companies just in order to compete. You know, like Studebaker or Packard, and I've had Locomobile back in the old days and a couple Hupmobiles, but they always had something in their manufacture that made them a little bit better. Hudson was very good at that. They were the first one to have their brakes, actually up until they merged with Nash. They had a brake system that I still think can't be beat. They had a hydraulic system, but if the brakes ever failed, like if you had a leaky brake, which happens with these older cars quite a bit, they always had a backup system of the mechanical brake. So if you push down on the brake and it got about 2 inches from the floor, the hydraulic was gone, but you still had the last couple inches of play. The mechanical took over, so they always would stop, you know, which is before they come out with the dual master cylinders and in the newer cars. That was a big problem back in the day, you know, in the 30s and early 40s, all through the 40s really.
Dave Lanning's car collection is beyond a reasonable doubt the face of the American dream.